Hi, I'm Brinley. When I was 9, my parents dropped me off at a group home and said it was just for the weekend. They never came back. No note, no goodbye, nothing. Years later, my mom, now a best-selling life coach, stood on a stage talking about resilience, acting like I never existed. They didn't just abandon me, they rewrote the story without me in it. But what happens when the forgotten daughter decides to tell her side? What happens when silence isn't surrender, but strategy? No child forgets their 9th birthday. Some kids remember the cake, some remember the balloons. Me? I remember the silence, the kind that clung to the corners of my throat and never left. It started with how they dressed me that morning. A soft yellow dress, hair tied with matching ribbon, shiny white shoes I hadn't worn since Easter. They didn't say much, just the usual smiles, nods, and a quiet, "Happy birthday, sweetheart." My mom, Verena, had this way of smiling without moving her eyes. That morning, it was even more obvious. My dad, Dorian, stayed behind the wheel, engine running as if the world was waiting on us. No cake, no candles. Just a paper bag with my name on it, and a gift I wasn't allowed to open yet. "We're taking you somewhere special," Mom said. "It's like a little camp for kids with birthdays this week. You'll love it." Something in her voice was rehearsed. Too calm, too even. I clutched the handles of that gift bag until my knuckles turned the same pale shade as my shoes. The drive was short. 10 minutes from our house in Bakersfield, past a strip mall and a 7-Eleven, we pulled into a building that looked more like an office than a place for kids. The sign said Meadow Hill Youth Care. I should have known right then. When the front door opened, a woman in blue scrubs stepped out. She looked surprised to see us. We weren't expecting any intake today," she said. Verena chuckled. "Yay, it was a last-minute thing. Just a couple of days. Her name's Brinley." Dad reached over the seat and tousled my hair. "Make some new friends, kiddo." Then they both walked me to the entrance, quick little steps like they were late for something. "We'll pick you up Monday, sweetheart," Mom whispered, brushing a strand of hair off my forehead. "Be brave, okay?" I remember blinking at her. "You're not staying?" "We'll call later," she said, and then they were gone. Just like that. The woman at the desk checked a folder, shook her head, and said softly, "Well, guess we'll make it work." A girl with braces showed me to my bunk. Top row, corner bed. The room smelled like powdered soap and whatever was in cafeteria meatloaf. I dropped the gift bag on the mattress. My name was taped on the wall above the bed, except someone had written something underneath it. In black marker, on a torn strip of paper, it read, "Orphan Girl." There was a giggle from behind me. A group of girls sat cross-legged near the TV, whispering behind their hands. I ripped the paper down, but the tape snagged and tore the edge of the blanket. I smoothed it over like that could make it better. It didn't. A staff member passed by. She saw the note, saw me, and shrugged. "Don't worry about them. Kids here talk mean before they talk kind." I nodded, but I didn't speak. That night, I stayed in my yellow dress. I curled up under the itchy wool sheet and counted ceiling tiles instead of candles. I remembered my 8th birthday, how Dad lit the cake with a barbecue lighter, how Mom sang off key but smiled like she meant it. I could still feel the frosting on my lip, the way they laughed when I blew out all 9 candles at once. And then, black. No candles tonight, no cake, no one. I didn't cry. I just listened. Listened to the hallway quiet down, to a door somewhere click shut, to someone down the hall whispering into a pillow. I turned onto my side and faced the wall. In America, they say family is forever, but no one talks about what happens when forever ends without warning. When it leaves a kid in a strange building, with strangers who forgot her name before she even spoke. Oprah once said, "You become what you believe." That night, I started believing I was forgettable. Later, I heard the sound of a door alarm chirping as staff locked the exit for the night. I sat up in bed, looked toward the hallway where Mom and Dad had walked me just hours ago. Even if I wanted to find them, I couldn't. They were already gone, and I hadn't even noticed the moment they stopped being mine. And when the lights went off that night, I realized I wasn't just left, I was erased. After the lights clicked off and the hallway fell into that unnatural hush, I lay in my bunk and stared straight up. The ceiling had little cracks in the plaster, a thin line that zigzagged like someone had once tried to split the room in half and failed. I kept my eyes there because I didn't want to cry. I kept listening, waiting to hear Mom's heels click on the tile, hear her whisper, "Just kidding, baby, let's go home." But nothing came, not her voice, not even footsteps, just the humming of the vending machine down the hallway and that weird flickering light above the exit sign, always blinking, never steady. I didn't sleep that first night. I barely moved. I counted the cracks in the ceiling and retraced every second of the car ride that morning. Maybe I missed something, a signal, a clue. But all I remembered was Mom handing me the paper bag and Dad avoiding my eyes when I asked if they'd be there to pick me up Monday. I must have fallen asleep just before dawn because I woke up to the sound of laughter. Harsh, throat-scraping laughter. My hands were numb from clutching the blanket too tightly, and my dress was wrinkled from sleeping in it. I sat up and tried to act like I knew what I was doing, like I belonged. At breakfast, I sat alone. The oatmeal was gray, like it had given up on being food. I took 2 bites and stopped trying. That afternoon, while everyone else was outside, I started organizing the junk drawer near my bunk. More like trying to make myself useful. That's when I found it. Tucked under an old worksheet with someone else's name on it was a sketchbook. Half filled. The drawings were messy, overlapping. Stick figures with names like Mom and Me, written in curly penmanship. The last drawing was half finished. A girl sitting on a couch with 2 taller shapes standing behind her. I flipped to a blank page and held the pencil tight like it might fly away. I began to draw. I imagined my mom back at home, arguing with someone at the front desk about how they made a mistake and they needed me back. I imagined her packing a suitcase full of snacks and warm socks and saying, "Brinley hates cold feet." I imagined her voice calling out for me in the hallway, arms open, mascara smudged, eyes real this time. And then I drew it. Our old living room, the green couch, the fireplace we never used. I added a dog we never had. I gave them all smiles they'd never worn. And I sat there for an hour, lying to myself on paper. Later, when a staff member walked by and saw me drawing, she didn't pause. "Don't get too attached to anyone here, sweetheart," she said. "Kids rotate out all the time." I nodded again. I always nodded. That was my new thing. Weeks passed. I got used to the smell of bleach and old spaghetti. I kept to myself, stayed small. At night, I drew scenes that never existed. At breakfast, I sat in the same spot, by the window, but not close enough to be noticed. Then one morning, while hiding in the art room to avoid a group game, I heard it. A voice. Sharp, professional, on the phone. No, the parents left a note saying not to call. They relinquished all contact voluntarily. The word voluntarily cracked something inside me. I backed away before she noticed me. I went straight to my room, tore out the family picture I'd drawn the week before, and flushed it down the toilet. I didn't eat that day. I didn't talk. I sat by the vending machine and stared at the exit sign, flickering like always. "You don't always scream when you're abandoned," I whispered to myself. "Sometimes you just vanish right back." By that weekend, I had a new rule. Survive first, feel later. That's when I met Kayla. She was 2 years older, mean as hell to everyone else, but for some reason, she offered me half her Pop-Tart in exchange for a roll of clear tape. "You stay invisible," she told me, licking frosting off her finger, "and you might survive the week." I memorized that like scripture. I stopped speaking unless spoken to. I made my bed like I was training for the army. I smiled when adults looked. I vanished when kids did. If I had to be that orphan girl, then I was going to be the one no one could blame for anything. There was a kind of safety in silence, a power in blending in. At night, I'd lie on my side and think about how easy it was to disappear in a place where no one wanted to remember you anyway. In a country where people replace their phones every year, swap out dogs, abandon jobs, and call it progress, kids like me learned we were one signature away from never being anyone at all. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I wasn't sure if I'd ever tell mine, but I knew this. I would not be part of hers. Then one morning, as I was helping clean up after breakfast, a woman with a clipboard pulled me aside. "You're being transferred," she said, not unkindly. "Another facility upstate. Maybe this one'll be better." She handed me a list of what to pack. No one asked if I wanted to go. They never do. But I knew this. The farther they moved me, the harder it'd be for anyone to find me again. The farther they moved me, the harder it'd be for anyone to find me again. That thought played like a record on loop as I stepped into the new facility in Fresno. The entrance smelled like plastic floor cleaner and over-microwaved popcorn. Familiar, sterile, artificial. I dragged my duffel across the linoleum floor while a staff member named Lena glanced at her clipboard and mumbled, "Brinley, new intake, third bunk on the left." She didn't smile. Most didn't. The hallway buzzed with flickering ceiling lights. A girl shoved past me with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders like armor. Another stared at the wall with earbuds in, mouthing lyrics I couldn't hear. Everyone looked like they were halfway through a sentence they'd never finish. I was 10 the week I got there, and no one asked me my birthday. I didn't volunteer the information, but on the night it came, my first birthday since Bakersfield, I sat alone in the kitchen and made myself dinner. Instant noodles in a paper bowl. I watched the microwave count down like it was a birthday candle. When it beeped, I whispered, "Make a wish," and blew into the steam. There were no candles, no singing. I scrounged a piece of bread from the pantry, squeezed mustard from a crusty bottle, and wrote, "Happy birthday" to me, in crooked letters. I ate it like communion. That was the first time I celebrated myself. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad. I was just getting good at not reacting. A few days later, I heard my name while walking past the staff hallway. "She's quiet now," one voice said, low and careless. "But these are the ones who flip later." "Unstable," said another. "Emotional suppression can't last forever." I froze, just outside their line of sight. They were talking about me like I was a ticking time bomb they'd forgotten to unplug. I didn't feel angry or hurt. I just filed it away. That was the night I learned adults label what they don't bother to understand. After that, I made adjustments. Small ones. The kind that didn't look like survival, but were. I never asked for seconds at dinner. I kept my socks folded. I avoided eye contact. I smiled when they looked, stayed invisible when they didn't. It wasn't healing, I knew that much. But it was safe. And safe was enough. They started calling me easy. Staff whispered to each other, "Brinley's low maintenance," like I was a car they could leave idling and forget to service. But inside, I wasn't silent. I was observant, sharp. Every word, every sideways glance. They stuck to me like lint. I once heard a counselor say, "The loud kids are the broken ones." But I've seen loud kids bounce back faster than anyone. They yell, they scream, they heal. Quiet kids like me, we walk around with open wounds you can't see. We walk quiet because even our pain learned to whisper. Fred Rogers once said, "Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable." But what if no one lets you mention it? What if every time you try, someone calls it a phase or a behavior problem? So you learn to stay quiet. You learn to draw your pain instead of speaking it. You write pretend letters to pretend mothers and fold them into shoeboxes. You sit through therapy sessions where the therapist says, "How does that make you feel?" And you lie, "I'm fine." Because fine gets you dismissed quicker. Fine gets you moved to the next room, next home, next nowhere. One night, long after lights out, I sat up in bed and heard her. A scream, raw, panicked, ripped down the hallway. It wasn't someone dreaming. It was someone fighting. A girl, probably new, yelling, "Don't touch me!" Doors slammed. Footsteps pounded. 2 staff members tried to coax her down while she kicked and sobbed. I didn't flinch. I didn't get up. I just laid there, watching the shadows on the wall flicker. She kept screaming. They kept trying. Eventually, the sound dulled into muffled sobs. The hallway settled again. I stared at the bunk across from mine. She was there now, face red, eyes wide, shaking. That used to be me. Now I'm just trying not to become her again. Now I'm just trying not to become her again. That night, after the screaming stopped and staff dragged the new girl off for observation, I sat on my mattress and stared across the room at her bunk. She hadn't even had time to put a sheet on it before she lost control. Her duffel lay crumpled near the foot of the bed, untouched. I could still hear her breath hitching behind the closed door down the hall. No one else stirred. They'd all learned the rule by now. In here, quiet girls get treated like wallpaper. Screaming girls get replaced. 6 months later, I was in Merced. Another group home, another paper to sign. I stopped reading the intake forms after the second facility. They all said the same thing. To be reviewed for long-term placement. But none of them lasted longer than a school semester. That's where I met Delora Kane. She wasn't like the others. Not immediately unkind. Not quick to anger. No, Delora was the soft kind of controlling. She smiled too much. She used the word sweetheart like it was currency. "You can call me Mom if you'd like," she said one morning, handing me a plastic tray of scrambled eggs and toast. "Wouldn't it be easier if you just called me that? That's what I am, aren't I?" I didn't answer right away. I set the tray down at my table, same seat every morning, and looked her straight in the eye. "You're a staff, and this is a job." Her smile froze. It was the first time I saw her eyes go cold. Later that afternoon, I was written up for disrespectful behavior. No incident listed. Just a checkbox. Respect to her meant disappearing into someone else's idea of who I should be. The following week, my breakfast tray came with a small white pill and a paper cup of water. No one explained what it was for. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Precautionary stabilization," the nurse replied. "Standard for high-adjustment youth." I didn't argue. I took the pill, held it under my tongue until I reached the bathroom, spit it into the drain, and let the water wash it away. They couldn't numb what they couldn't see. So I made sure they never saw it. From that day forward, I cataloged everything. Mental notes. Who watched who punished silence, who rewarded compliance. I noticed which girls were called resilient and which were labeled volatile. The difference wasn't in behavior, it was in how easy you made their job. I couldn't win with noise, so I'd win with patience. I started keeping a little notebook tucked inside my mattress seam. Nothing detailed, nothing risky, just words, names, phrases that stuck in my mind like splinters. Low affect. Emotionally unresponsive. Delayed attachment. Funny how no one ever asked why I might feel that way. In places like these, quiet girls are praised. But they're not protected. They're just easier to manage. I remembered reading a quote once on a magnet in the nurses' lounge. "A woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until you put her in hot water." I thought about that every time they looked past me to deal with someone louder. Then, on a rainy Thursday, I got called to the office. The administrator, a tall woman with half glasses and a tired expression, didn't look up from her screen when she said, "Looks like you've got a transfer request." I blinked. "The system again?" "No," she said, scrolling with her mouse. "This one's from a family member." My throat went tight. It had been almost 2 years since I heard that phrase used without sarcasm. "They said someone claimed to know me?" She looked at me then. Really looked. "Yeah, someone who used to love you. At least that's what the paperwork says." I didn't say a word. I didn't ask who. But inside, My thoughts moved fast. Faster than they had in a long time. Someone who used to love me. And that's what scared me the most. They said someone claimed to know me. Someone who used to love me. I was called into the director's office like I had done something wrong. My legs stiffened as I walked, prepared for punishment out of habit. But inside, she gestured for me to sit. Gently, like something fragile had been placed on the table between us. A letter. Sealed. A name on the front, written in loopy cursive that pulled at some half-buried part of my memory. Brinley. She pushed it across the table. This came for you yesterday. There was a photo taped to the envelope. I almost didn't look. But curiosity is a stubborn thing, especially when you've learned not to expect anything. It was me, 7 years old, in a yellow dress, standing awkwardly between two people I hadn't seen in years, but still couldn't forget. My mother's smile was all teeth and no warmth. My father looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I remember that day, barely. I was crying earlier because I thought we were going to the zoo, and instead, we ended up at someone's backyard barbecue with strangers and cold hot dogs. On the back, scrawled in the same handwriting as the envelope. She was always the quiet one. Beneath the photo was a note. I'd like to reconnect, if she's willing. I stared at that word, willing, longer than I should have, like it was an invitation to a party I hadn't asked for. No one leaves a kid like a stranger and then asks to reconnect like a pen pal. I walked out without opening the letter, slipped it into my back pocket, untouched. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I reached for the shoebox I kept under my bed. Dusty, bent at the corners, wrapped once in duct tape. Inside were the letters, dozens of them, all beginning the same way. Dear Mom, I'm still here. I never mailed them. They weren't for her. They were for me. To prove I still had a voice, even if no one was listening, I pulled out the one I wrote on my 11th birthday. It said, I forgive you for forgetting. I just wish I didn't have to keep reminding myself I exist. I didn't cry. I just folded the letter again, tucked it back in, and whispered to the dark, I wasn't writing to be heard. I was writing to stay human. The next morning, I walked to the rec room early and asked for two things, a pen and a lighter. I wrote her back on a torn page of notebook paper. If you want to come back, you come with answers, not apologies, and never with a camera crew. Then I lit the paper from the corner and watched it curl into ash in a ceramic bowl they kept near the plants. It felt like a ritual, like reclaiming something she never asked permission to take. Later that day, I sat with my journal and began to write what I'd say if I ever saw her again. Not what she'd expect to hear. Not, I missed you. Not, why did you go? I started with a question she'd probably never answer. What did I ever do to make silence easier than raising me? I didn't stop writing for an hour. Forgiveness without accountability isn't healing. It's PR. And I wasn't interested in being anyone's redemption arc. Brené Brown once said, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And I wasn't unclear anymore. That weekend, a staff member caught me folding towels in the laundry room. You're being visited? She said casually, holding a clipboard like she was talking about an allergy appointment. The woman who wrote the letter, she's coming, this weekend. I didn't flinch, but something deep inside me, something old and bitter, stirred like it had just woken up after years of pretending to be asleep. They said she's coming. They said she's coming, this weekend. It was Thursday when they told me. Just enough time to think too much, not enough time to build armor. I spent the next 2 days convincing myself I didn't care, while checking the mirror twice as often and picking at the scab on my wrist I hadn't noticed before. Saturday came fast, cold air clinging to the window like it had something to say. I brushed my hair 5 times, chose the only shirt I had without a stain on it. The visitation room smelled like stale coffee and cheap hand soap. They'd set out chairs, wiped the table. Someone even remembered to put out a box of tissues. I sat in the one closest to the door. Heart fast, mind louder. When the knock came, I didn't breathe. But it wasn't her. The woman who walked in wore pearls and perfume. Her smile looked glued on. She clutched a manila folder like it held the cure to something she didn't understand. "Brinley, hi," she chirped. "I'm Amanda. I'm part of the Family Reconnect Initiative. You were selected for possible placement." I blinked. "You're not her." "No," she said, sitting across from me like we were about to talk about grades or hobbies. "But I represent families who care. Isn't that what you want?" I didn't answer. I stood, pushed my chair in like it mattered, walked out without a word. No one stopped me, not Amanda, not staff. That was the thing about group homes. You could vanish right in front of them, and they'd never ask why. Back in the dorm, I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't draw, didn't write. I lay on my bunk and stared at the ceiling like it had secrets to spill. At dinner, I didn't eat, just moved my spoon around until the mashed potatoes looked like they'd been stirred by ghosts. That night, after lights out, I wandered into the common room. The TV was on low. A late-night local talk show flickered across the screen. That's when I saw her. Verena, my mother. She wore a navy blazer, hair pinned back like she was running for office. She smiled at the host, laughed politely. The Chiron read, "Life coach and author, healing generational trauma." "I had to make impossible choices as a single mom," she said, "but I did what was best." I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just stared. My breath caught somewhere behind my ribs and stayed there. She was using my absence as her brand. She erased me, then rebuilt herself over the space I used to take up. By morning, I'd ripped apart every fake family values brochure I could find. I left the pieces in the visitor room trash, like a graveyard no one visited. In this country, if you dress your wounds well enough, people call it resilience. If you speak with enough conviction, no one asks what it cost you to sound that strong. Glennon Doyle once wrote, "We can do hard things, but let's not lie about who we had to hurt to do them." Verena lied. Later that week, while I helped fold towels in the laundry room, my preferred escape from fake therapy and colder food, I was pulled aside by a counselor named Teresa. She looked tired, like whatever she was about to say had drained her already. "Your file got flagged again," she said, voice low. "Someone's pushing for early release under kinship care." I stared at her. "It's a family thing," she added, trying to sound casual. "Not the system this time." I nodded slowly. "Someone wants me, just not publicly. Someone who wants me, just not publicly." That's what Teresa said. She didn't look at me when she said it, just dropped the words on the desk like a paperweight she didn't want to carry anymore. I sat frozen, blinking down at the file in front of her. She slid it toward me. "Request for kinship-based discharge," the header read. Below that, Verena Gaskin. It took a second to register. I'd gotten used to the name Verena Watts. The new name, the one she used in the interview, the one that made her sound like a brand instead of a woman. Gaskin. Teresa glanced up. "She listed herself as your mother." "She listed herself as something," I said. There was a letter included. Not handwritten, typed, professionally formatted, even watermarked. The kind of document that sounded polite while cornering you into something you didn't agree to. "By signing this, you agree to acknowledge reconciliation for potential public records and future documentation." It was the kind of language you use when you're more worried about headlines than healing. I looked up at Teresa. "Does she even want me at home?" I asked, flat. "It doesn't say," she replied, flipping a page. "Just that she wants this completed before her book tour." Of course. It wasn't about me, it was about her schedule. A day later, another envelope came. Not from her directly, but from a firm in Los Angeles. A notarized draft of a provisional will. I wasn't dumb. I'd read enough paperwork in my time to know when something smelled off. If Brinley agrees to remain off public record and not pursue media attention, she is eligible to be named in the revised estate. Eligible. Not guaranteed. Not promised. Just dangled like bait in front of a dog already trained not to bark. She didn't want to restore me. She wanted to trademark me. I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom that night and read every word out loud. Then I ripped the pages in half, then in quarters. I flushed them piece by piece, listening to the swirl like it meant something. I didn't cry. I grabbed my journal, the one I never let the staff see, the one I kept tucked inside the lining of my pillowcase. I wrote one sentence in thick black pen. I don't want her house, her name, or her lawyer. I want my own damn future. The next day, during library time, I used the old desktop in the corner to search how to file for legal emancipation in the state of California. I didn't know if it would work, but I needed to know I had a choice. People talk about chosen family all the time, but nobody warns you what it feels like when your family chooses you back, not out of love, but out of need, or shame, or worse, convenience. Michelle Obama once said, "You have to fill yourself up with love, not anyone else. Become a whole person on your own." That quote hit different now. I wasn't waiting to be picked anymore. I wasn't auditioning for a role in someone else's redemption story. I wasn't going to show up just to be posed beside her like a prop that said, "See? She's fine now." The office phone rang 3 days later while I was cleaning the art room. It was for me, a voicemail left by a publisher representative. "We just need her to agree to speak well in public. That's all." That's all. They forgot something. I may have been silent, but I was never stupid. They forgot something. I may have been silent, but I was never stupid. The day I reached out to Nadine, I didn't expect a response. She hadn't written, called, or even tried since the day I was dropped off like a forgotten suitcase. But I figured if anyone in that whole family had a sliver of honesty left, it might be her. To my surprise, she answered. We met at a small diner near the edge of Sacramento. One of those places with cracked booths and a waitress who'd worked there longer than I'd been alive. Nadine showed up in a beige cardigan and nervous eyes, her purse clutched to her chest like it held secrets. "I wasn't sure you'd really call," she said, sitting across from me. "I wasn't sure you'd show up," I replied. Silence lingered while our coffee cooled. She sipped, then sighed. "Your mom. She made decisions. None of them were fair." "That's generous," I said. She winced. "During the bankruptcy, things got bad. Verena and Dorian were told they could only afford to keep 2 kids under the insurance plan. It was either fight to keep all 3 or let one go." My stomach turned, but my face stayed still. "You were the quiet one, Bryn. On paper, the easiest to place. She said you'd adapt." I didn't interrupt. I just turned on the audio recorder in my pocket. Nadine didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. "I wanted to take you in," she said. "I swear to you." But Verena said no. Said it would confuse the narrative. Her words, not mine. Confuse the narrative. As if I were a character in a plotline she'd rewritten without my consent. I left that meeting with a file of truth. Not justice, but truth. And that night, fate handed me something else. Verena left a voicemail. She thought she was speaking to her publisher. Probably didn't realize the line was still open, recording every word. "We don't mention the 3rd child," she said. "Too messy. This book is about resilience, not mistakes." I didn't scream. I didn't call her. I just uploaded it. Anonymously. The clip hit the Foster Youth Network like a match in dry brush. It was shared, reposted, stitched with comments from others who'd been erased for the sake of someone else's image. Within 2 days, it had over 80,000 views. The media noticed. Bloggers dissected every frame of her interviews. Journalists asked questions Verena didn't want to answer. She canceled appearances. Comments were disabled on her videos. Sponsors started pulling out. And I stayed silent. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's witness. I wasn't out for blood. I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was trying to exist. On my own terms. Desmond Tutu once said, "If you want peace, you don't talk to your friends, you talk to your enemies." But he never said you had to hand them the microphone. Verena's team didn't take long to react. A new attorney contacted the home, requesting a call with me directly. They kept it vague until the very end. "She's willing to issue a formal apology," he said, voice careful, "if the clip is removed." I hung up without replying. Because here's the thing. Funny thing about truth. Once it's out, it doesn't care about your terms. Funny thing about truth. Once it's out, it doesn't care about your terms. By the time the clip hit its third day online, I couldn't open my phone without seeing my mother's name trending. It wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was gravity. The world was finally tilting the way it should have long ago. I sat on the floor of my studio apartment, legs crossed under me, scrolling. Not through comments from strangers, those blurred together, but the private messages. Some were from former foster kids. Others were from people who said things like, "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew the power wasn't in replying. It was in not needing to. Then someone tagged me in a video. I hesitated before clicking, but curiosity never dies quietly. It was a clip from a morning show dated 3 years back. The host smiled into the camera, leaning toward Verena, who wore soft pink and a necklace I remembered from childhood. "And your kids?" the host asked. Verena smiled, wide, polished, camera-ready. "I have 2 amazing kids," she said. "Both successful. I count my blessings every day." No pause. No catch in her breath. No mention of me. She didn't forget me. She erased me, and the world applauded her for it. A few days later, I passed by a bookstore downtown. A poster stood tall in the window. "Healing Backward, the memoir that's changing lives." Her face smiled back at me, calm and composed. Outside, a woman, probably in her 60s, pointed at the display and said to a friend, "She's the kind of mother America needs more of." I didn't stop. I didn't argue. I walked past, ducked into a coffee shop across the street, and sat with a black drip and the weight of irony sitting heavier in my gut than the caffeine. I didn't need revenge, but I needed them to stop calling her brave. Kellen March, my lawyer, called that night. His voice was calm, but I could hear the energy crackling beneath it. "This is your moment, Bryn. If you want to go public, press charges, file for civil damages. We have the leverage now." I let the silence stretch between us before I answered. "No," he sighed. "You're letting her off easy. I'm letting myself off the hook of needing anything from her." That stopped him. I could hear him nodding, even if he didn't say it. Some battles don't need to be won. They need to be walked away from. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not swing back when you've finally gotten the upper hand. Audre Lorde once wrote, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation." I wasn't preserving her legacy. I was preserving what little was left of mine. The world could scream on her behalf all it wanted. I didn't need a rebuttal. I needed a life that wasn't tied to her name anymore. That evening, as I cleaned up dishes from the tiny kitchen sink and folded laundry in the same 2 baskets I'd owned since the group home, my phone buzzed again. A message request. No profile picture. 3 words. "Can we talk?" The sender. Dorian Pike. He wasn't gone. He was hiding too. He wasn't gone. He was hiding too. I sat in the cafe 15 minutes early, palms flat against the laminate tabletop, trying not to rehearse what I'd say. I'd promised myself, if I agreed to meet him, there'd be no performance, no carefully constructed strength. Just truth. The door opened, and in walked a man I only recognized because of the slope of his shoulders. Dorian Pike, my father. He looked older, smaller than I remembered. His hair had thinned, and his jacket hung off him like it belonged to someone more certain. No ring on his finger, no hesitation in his step. He spotted me, nodded once, and approached like a man stepping onto a cracked bridge. "Brinley," he said softly, pulling out the chair. I didn't smile. "No lies," I reminded him. He nodded. "No lies." We sat in silence for a while. He stirred the cream into his coffee like it mattered. I just waited. I didn't agree to give you up, he started, voice hoarse. Your mother, she had the lawyers, the narrative, the signature forms. I didn't fight her. He looked down. I signed papers I never read. I wasn't just weak, I was silent when it mattered. My arms stayed crossed. My face didn't move. I was listening, but not for apologies. She said you'd adapt, he added. Said you were better off without the chaos. I watched him closely. And you believed her? I wanted to, he admitted. Then came the part I didn't know I needed to hear, but somehow already suspected. She filed for a partial insurance payout, he said. Classified you as absent and untrackable. It helped us. Cover debts. The bankruptcy. We were sinking. My stomach turned, but I didn't flinch. So I was more useful missing than mothered? I asked. He winced. I let it happen. Because I thought you were better off invisible than entangled. There it was. I didn't scream. Didn't flip the table. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and said, Thank you for your truth. Then I stood. We don't need to revisit what never existed. I just needed the truth to bury it. He looked like he wanted to say something else. Maybe a plea, maybe nothing. I didn't wait to find out. As I pushed open the cafe door, the wind caught my breath. Late autumn in Sacramento always carried the kind of chill that made your bones remember. Closure wasn't an invitation. It was a boundary. Forgiveness isn't reconciliation. It's the release of hope that the past could have been different. Oprah said, When people show you who they are, believe them. I finally did. Walking down the block, my phone buzzed. A calendar notification popped up. Verina's book signing, 3 p.m. today. Location, Barnes & Noble, K Street. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the dismiss button. I wasn't going there for closure. I was going there for the last word. I wasn't going there for closure. I was going there for the last word. The cafe was tucked between an insurance office and a pawn shop, the kind of place you didn't find unless you were looking for somewhere unremarkable. I chose it on purpose. I didn't want anyone to overhear, or to recognize him, or worse, to recognize me. I got there early, ordered tea I wouldn't drink, sat at a table near the window where I could watch who came in, and more importantly, who didn't. He walked in 7 minutes late. I recognized him before I was ready. The shape of his shoulders, the way his hands stayed in his jacket pockets, like they were hiding something. His face hadn't aged well, but I didn't feel pity, just a dull kind of knowing. Brinley? He said softly, almost like he was asking if it was really me. I nodded, but didn't stand. No lies, I said. He sat, didn't ask what I was drinking, didn't order anything. His eyes scanned the room once before they settled on me. I thought they'd just take you for a while, he began. Not forever. I said nothing. I didn't know what I was signing. Verina had it all set up. She said it was temporary, that the court just needed space to process the paperwork. I crossed my arms. They took me because you gave them permission. He dropped his gaze. I was weak. I didn't argue. Weak was the kindest word for what he'd been. He shifted in his chair. After the bankruptcy, things got bad. Verina, she filed a claim through our life insurance. I stiffened. She listed you as untrackable. Legally, she didn't declare you dead, just inaccessible. It was a way to relieve the policy and cover the mortgage. I didn't stop her. I let the silence grow, let him feel it. So I was more useful missing than mothered, I said, my voice as flat as I could make it. He blinked slowly. I let it happen, because I thought you were better off invisible than entangled. I stared at the window. A woman walked by with a stroller, laughing into her phone. Somewhere outside, life was happening. Inside, it felt like we were sitting in a vacuum. You don't need to apologize, I said finally. I'm not here for that. He swallowed. Then why did you come? I wanted to hear it from the one who watched and did nothing. I needed it from the man who left me twice. He looked like he might cry. I didn't care if he did. Do you need me to say something that'll make you feel better? I asked, already knowing the answer. No, he said. I just wanted to see you again. Well, I said, standing, now you have. I didn't hug him, didn't shake his hand. I walked out into the afternoon light and didn't look back. Some people don't leave because they hate you. They leave because they hate what they see in themselves when they're near you. You don't get to pick the cards you're dealt, but you damn sure get to decide how you play them. Cheryl Strayed wrote that once, and I think about it often. I wasn't playing anymore. I was folding and walking away. As I reached the corner of K Street, my phone buzzed. Text message, no name. She's doing a reading today, Barnes & Noble. You coming? I stared at the screen. For the first time in years, I didn't feel curious. I felt ready. For the first time in years, I didn't feel curious. I felt ready. The doors of Barnes & Noble parted with a hiss, releasing a whiff of coffee and paper. I walked past the shelves without looking. The line stretched through the aisles, people holding crisp copies of Verina's memoir. The title glared from every wall. Healing starts with her. Her. I stood in the back, dressed in black from coat to boots. No fanfare, no makeup, just presence. Verina stood on a raised platform near the back of the store. A stack of her books formed a makeshift pedestal beside her podium. Her hair was curled just right. Her voice was confident, measured. This story, she said, smiling to the crowd, is about what it means to rise again after losing everything. Motherhood, marriage, identity, all of it. People nodded. Phones filmed. She went on. Buzzwords like sacrifice, resilience, single parent. A performance polished by years of revision. And then the screen behind her flickered. At first, I thought it wouldn't work. But then, there it was. A large QR code. Projected high and bold. Someone in the audience scanned it. A gasp followed. The screen shifted to a video. My video? 2 minutes. That's all it took. The audio played, her voice on the PR call. We don't mention the third child, too messy. Then, her lawyer's email offering hush money, a scanned image of the fake will, and finally, a headline quoting her TV appearance. I have 2 children. Silence followed. Heavy. Distant murmurs began to ripple across the room. Her mic was cut. She blinked, mouth open mid-word, unsure whether to go silent or spin. I walked up the center aisle, slow, steady, no rush. I didn't speak. I reached the front, pulled something from my coat pocket. A photo. Me, 7 years old, in a yellow dress, between her and Dorian. Awkward, forgotten. I placed it on the podium. Underneath, in black ink, the caption read, She said I was dead. I built myself alive. Then I turned. No applause, no shouting. Just the weight of a room realizing the story had changed. I walked out. Doors hissed closed behind me. 6 months passed. Her book was pulled from shelves. Public statements were issued. Donations refunded. Administrative oversight, they called it. I didn't gloat. I baked. My bakery opened with no ribbon cutting, no press. Just a sign above the door. The one who stayed. No explanation. No branding campaign. Just pies and peace. People came. Quiet ones. Loud ones. Lost ones. They didn't ask for my story. They just came back. One afternoon, after closing, I found a note tucked under the register. No signature. Just a line written in soft black ink. I was there. Thank you for standing. I kept it. Not for validation, for memory. I didn't burn the bridge. I lit the exit. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." Now, the story was out, and I was no longer in it for their comfort. They left me without a note, but I left them with a legacy.